Okay, in this video, we will discuss how to match things up. So there are numbers of ways that a study can be ruined before you even start connecting the data. The first, we are already exploring the sampling or selection bias, which is when the sample is not representative of the population. One example of this voluntary response bias, which is the bias introduced by only connecting data from those who volunteer to participate. This is not only potential source of bias. Okay, so other source of bias, we have sampling bias when the sample is not representative of the population, such as you're trying to find out, hey, what is the average height of the student at South Puget Sound Community College, and then you just survey basketball team players. So this is not representative because on average their height would be taller. So a second bias would be voluntary response bias, the sampling bias that often occurs when the sample is volunteer. For example, could be call-in radio shows that or solicited audience participation in a survey on a controversial topic such as abortion, affirmative action, gun control. The resulting sample tends to be overrepresented individuals who have strong opinion. Another bias we have is self-interest study bias. Bias that can occur when the researcher have interest in the outcomes. Example is consider a recent study which found that chewing gums might raise math grades in teenagers. This study was conducted by a Wrigley Science Institute, a branch of Wrigley Chewing Gum Company. So, of course, the company wants the result to favors in them, in favors of their. So, of course, this is a bias for the self-interest. And the next bias would be response bias, when the respondent gives inaccurate response for any reason. So, such as a survey asks people, when was the last time you visited your doctor? They may suffer from the response bias since many people might not remember exactly when they last saw a doctor or give an inaccurate response. Another bias would be perceived lack of anonymity. When the respondent feels given out an honest answer may negatively affect them. Well, the most common one is your boss may ask you, but you need to write down your name, about what do you think about the job. So this is how do you like your working environment, but it's not anonymous because you need to write down your name. So in this case, you might tend not to give a unbiased response, right? And last one is loaded questions bias, when the question wording influence the response, such as a survey asks, do you support funding research of alternative energy sources to reduce our reliance on a high polluting fossil fuel? So this is example of a loading or leading questions. The question whose wording leads the respondent towards the answer. Or no response bias, when people refusing to participate in the study can influence the validity of the outcome, such as a telephone poll asks the questions, do you often have time to relax and read a book? And 50% of people calls refuse to answer the survey. It is unlikely that the results will be representative of the entire population. This is an example of non-response bias, introduced by people refusing to participate in the study or dropping out of the experiment. When people refuse to participate, we can no longer be so certain that our sample is representative of the population. Okay, so now let's try to identify each potential sources for the bias. So, a survey asks how many sexual partners a person has had in last year. Well, what do you think? I would say some people they might not give you the real due to some social pressure, they might give you the real answers, right? So this might be a response bias. They might give out an inaccurate response because they lost count or they just don't want to disclose the information. Okay, a radio station asked the readers to a phone in their choice in a daily poll. So what would be that? So this should be a sampling bias because they just sampling the people who listen to the radio station or about their choice, right? That is not representative. Okay, a substitute teacher wants to know how students in the class did on their last test. The teacher asked the 10 students sitting in front row to state their latest score. Well, if you disclose your score in the public, you might feel a little bit uncomfortable. So these would be what? A perceive lack of anonymity. Because the respondent feels giving an honest answer. Of course, if I get a bad grade, I don't want to tell that to everyone that I failed the class. Okay, high school students are asked if they have consumed alcohol in the last 2 weeks. This is what? This is also response bias because we all know that it's illegal. If you're in high school, you're definitely under 21. It's illegal for you to consume alcohol. So you might end up to give an inaccurate response. Okay. E. The Beef Council released a study stating that consuming red meat poses little cardiovascular risk. So this is what? Well, self-interest bias. A poll asked, do you support the new transportation tax, or would you prefer to see our public transport system fall apart? So this is a leading question. That means they indicated that, hey, if you don't support the public transportation tax, then the public transportation is falling apart. So this should be a loading questions or leading questions bias. Okay, so very interesting. I learned something new as well. So that's it for today. Let me know if you have other questions.